Good evening, everybody. So as Maria said, we're going to talk about camera systems, night vision camera systems that can also be used in daylight. So this is something I've been researching for 7 or 8 years with, as Maria said, Natural England, the Woodland Trust. And it's from that I have to develop a system which I use. It's based on security equipment, so what the system I use, but I will mention 1 or 2 other systems as well. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and then we'll get started. Right. So I've just got a few images at the front, just to give you a rough idea of some of the wildlife that you can use these systems for. And I'll say a little bit about what the systems are, but it's not going to be a very technical webinar, because it's much more about, hopefully, to inspire you about the sort of range of applications that are possible. So here we have bats. These are barber-tailed bats. A few more words about them later. This is an otter underwater, which was very much by chance, because I was actually trying to film fish at the time. Dormouse in a box, so we're talking about dormice and badgers and various other wildlife as well. So it's just a sort of overview, if you like. So these particular systems with the camera and recorder are suitable for all types of wildlife. So I actually record them for research, but also at home, particularly in my garden. So I'm very fortunate. I live next to a large wood. It's not my wood, but I live next door to in Devon, and we do have quite a wide range of wildlife. So we're very lucky, really. And the systems I use are mainly by battery, because very often wildlife is out in the wild and not next to mains power, but exactly the same system can be used for mains power if that is available. So right, the foxcloves here, I'll show you the video. These were filmed in Woodland near me. And their presence was first noted with a trail camera. I will mention trail cameras later. Actually, my neighbour's wood, she's got very large wood. And the hole on the left, down here, is, we think, an old badger set, which the foxcubs use. And there actually are 4 cubs, so there's only 3 in this video. And at this stage, they don't really look very much like foxes, they look much more like Siamese cats. However, I put the videos on repeat, so whilst I'm talking, they'll go round and round. So I've used them for birds as well, and this particular one, because one of the advantages of these systems, they can be left unattended. They are, because they're based on security equipment, CCTV equipment, that is designed to be left outside, which is a great advantage because not all cameras used for night vision can be safely left outside, either because they need someone with them or sometimes because they're just too expensive. So this is a tawny owl, and I had my camera set up on this branch here, which is on the edge of the woodland, because tawny owls tend to sit on branches at the edge of woodland. Unfortunately, I was lucky, and this tawny owl came to sit on the branch to eat his meal. So if you're at all sensitive, I would look away now, as the owl swallows whole. So it is a very good place. So if you see a woodland and they see these low-slung branches, and particularly if you have log piles at the edge of the woodland, which I did in this case, then the chances are you will see owls. And they came round about the time, you can see about 9 o'clock, 9:30, and they were there most nights in summer. Okay. So I'd like to go into the detail, a little bit more detail about the sort of equipment that I refer to as night vision camera systems. Now, trail cameras, sometimes called camera traps. Now, these are very frequently used, have been used for quite a while, but in my experience, they're best used to tell you if there is wildlife present. They're very convenient. They have an inbuilt camera and recorder, very small, and they're just powered by normal AA batteries. But they do have disadvantages. They are very convenient and they can have good videos in daytime, but they tend to, on the whole, produce very short files. So if you perhaps had your camera out for several days or even longer, and it was filming all the time, you could end up with hundreds of very short files lasting about 1 minute, perhaps, maybe a bit more. But very often at night time, they're only about 15 seconds, which means you have a very large number of files, and it can be a bit tedious going through them all. The daylight videos are usually high quality, but night vision tend to be a bit grainy, simply because they're not using very powerful batteries. Thermal imaging. Now, thermal imaging is very popular in that people are interested in them because the images that they produced are very colourful. And they have a lot of advantages in that if you were out in the wild, you could see things in the middle of bushes simply because of the heat that they gave off. And a lot of ecologists use these, mainly for bat emergence as a scope, or there are some cameras, but they tend to be rather expensive. Even the cheapest scopes can cost several thousand. And if you have a camera and a recorder, it can be tens of thousands. And they can be complex to interpret. And I know that there are companies now that will hire these out and also show you how to use them. But the other disadvantage of them is that they can't generally be left unattended, partly because they're very expensive, but it's simply the way they're constructed. They tend not to be something that is left out for long periods of time. So they are useful if you have a lot of money, but you don't get videos that you can really watch. You can't really determine a lot, other than might see coloured blobs flying around, but you can't really get a great deal of information from them. However, there are small units you can attach to a phone, and they're quite good if you want to go out spotting wildlife at night and just looking what's underneath the bushes, and you can see things like that. So they're very good for that. And the smaller units aren't quite as expensive. Now this image here is actually a cat. Very unexciting, really, but it's the one I managed to get from my small unit on the phone, but I haven't really used it a great deal outside. But this slide shows what I mainly use for wildlife for all sorts of reasons. I won't go into all the reasons too much because I don't want this to be too technical. Otherwise, I won't inspire you. Now, they're quite straightforward. The cameras are cameras that you see everywhere. They're CCTV cameras, but for wildlife, you just use a sort of low-end cameras, they're cheaper cameras, and a recorder. And the recorders now, you can get quite small recorders, which are quite portable, so they're very useful for that. So you have a camera connected to a recorder. The camera sends out the video signals when you apply power to it. I use mainly HD cameras, you may see IP cameras a lot, that's Internet Protocol cameras, and people say they're very good because you can get the videos on your phone, but that's all very well, but in most cases in the wild, if you want to find things in a wood, for example, you won't have mains power and you won't have a broadband signal or Wi-Fi. So this is why I use mainly HD cameras. So the recorder gets the signal from the camera, interprets the signal, and produces the videos. So say I use a recorder with a solid state drive. I used to use ones with a hard disk drive, which is fine, but you have to be careful not to drop them. And they're connecting cables, and these cables tend to have two sections, one to carry power to the camera and to take the video signals from the camera. And of course, you need a power source. I tend to use batteries, as I say, but you can use mains power. You need a small monitor for setting up. So if you want to point your camera somewhere, you want to make sure it's pointing at the right thing. So the monitor is very useful just when you get out there and put your equipment in place, and then you can disconnect it and take it away with you. But once you come to actually looking at the videos and hopefully at the videos that you've recorded on the recorder, then you need a larger monitor just so that you can see them more clearly. As well as the larger security type cameras, you can use smaller cameras. Bird box cameras are, not surprisingly, used for bird boxes, but you can use them for other situations as well. And they are quite good quality now, quite high resolution. And this one was for a small feeding station that I set up a while ago, just to see what small mammals were there. And one thing the Mammal Society does say, that feeding stations are fine if you want to see what wildlife is there, but it's not something that you should keep on for long periods of time for all sorts of reasons. It's not good for the wildlife to become dependent on another food source. And also it does make them a bit vulnerable to predators and also diseases. However, you can get some very entertaining videos. This is a bankful, and this is just a box. There's a light on the top and an entrance and another bankful. And as you see, they're very keen to keep the food to themselves, having a bit of a boxing match as well. This went on for a little while, but no one was injured, no blood was spilt. Oh, sorry, and I've just gone back to the beginning again. So it's the same fight, it's not another fight. So in the end, there was a winner, and the winner got the spoils. So you can have a lot of entertainment from something like that, as long as I say you just use it occasionally and not sort of all the time. So just a little bit of technical information here about the equipment that I use. This is a typical security camera. So if you put in security cameras or CCTV cameras in Google, that's often the type you will get. This is called a bullet shape, rather odd shaped bullet, but this is what they call them. You can get other shapes as well, but I have always found this to be the most convenient, because you can lift it up and down from side to side. You can rotate it, so you can sort of not quite get around corners, but almost. But they're very readily available. And what I normally do is fix it to a piece of wood and then screw that to a post or a tree. A recorder. This is just the sort of back end of the recorder, but the ones I use are very small, as I said up before, and solid state drive. You plug the camera in there, that's the cable coming from the camera, plug it in there. You have the power there, and you have a mouse, because you control the recorder using a normal computer mouse. And then this cable here is just connected, would be connected to the monitor. So once you have learned how to set them up, they really are quite easy to use, though some people can be somewhat daunted by technology. And I have written a book, which I will plug a bit later on, to explain step by step exactly how you can set the equipment up. And this is a portable monitor. This is a monitor you would take out into the field, which set it up in the field, just to make sure that your camera is working, the system is working, and that it's pointing at the right thing. Now, the best ones are about 7 or 8 inches. I know we're all metric, but they tend to be in inch sizes, preferably high resolution and with its own battery. Then you have far fewer cables. I found Lilliput, they're not cheap, but they are very good quality. You can get cheap monitors on eBay, but they don't always last very long. I'm sure there are very good ones, but I haven't found many on eBay. So once you've got your basic equipment, it's not a great deal of work to require to put it together. But once you've done it, you can see that. The first time you do it, it can be a bit daunting, as I said. So what can you use the camera systems? I mean, part of this is to say how they're used for conservation. But the aim of this webinar is really to appeal to everyone, not just ecologists, not just people doing research. It is really anyone who's interested in wildlife, or somebody who perhaps works in a nature reserve and is interested in getting videos for public engagement. This is a young roe deer, and if you see the date, it was 2015, so the cameras were quite good quality even then. This is a night time, so it was 6:19, actually in January, so it was quite dark then already. Now, where can you use these cameras? Now, once you've got them, once you've got your system, you want to know where you can put it. You can use them inside buildings, perhaps if you've got a back roost in a building, or you can use them outside. And that, as I said, is one of the big advantages, is that you can use them outside with mains or battery power. And because you can use them with batteries, you can use them in remote areas, in woodland, or anywhere where they're away from civilization, if you like. They can be used in small spaces with a bird box camera, and I've used them in dormouse boxes or small mammal tubes, or for birds. You can use them underwater. You can get submersible cameras. Not that easy to find, but you can get them. You can monitor fish, rock pools. Rock pools is one area that I think would be very interesting for anyone who wants to do research. And of course, otters, underwater otters, if you're lucky, and you have to be very lucky to find underwater otters. And this is just a few of the species you can use them for. But to be honest, I can't think of very many species that you can't use them for, because they're so flexible and because you can adjust the camera types if you want. So use them for bats. We'll be having a look at some bat videos. In fact, I can't really think of any species that you can't use them for. So I've used them with bats. I've used them with dormice, otters, badgers, deer, small mammals, not beavers, I have to say, not yet. I had to go to Canada to get a video of a beaver, but now beavers are going to be everywhere in England at some stage. So hopefully I'll be able to get some beavers here as well. Ground nesting birds, birds of prey, reptiles, and so on. And you can also use them for insects, if you're interested in insects. So we'll start off with bats first, because although perhaps it's not something that most people want to record, if you're an ecologist, this is very important part of an ecologist's job. Very often is emergence, bat emergence. If there's any planning applications, then you nearly always have to do a bat survey, and you have to actually count the number of bats that come out at night. So the camera systems can be very good for that. They have their own inbuilt infrared. They have infrared LEDs which automatically switch on in the dark. So they're very useful for bats. This obviously is not recorded at night with infrared. And this is a rescued bat. It's quite a nice picture, a long-eared bat. So in 2016, I was doing some research for the Woodland Trust. I was studying barber-tailed bats at a maternity roost, and the roost is in this tree. And this is when the bats are returning to the roost. They're swarming. It will be in a minute. There you go, swarming around. 4:30, that's coming towards dawn, so they're returning to the roost. And they actually go into the bit in the middle, and you watch them. You can count the number that go in. So they also, I'm not quite sure, nobody quite knows why they fly around before they enter. There are lots of different theories about that. But they're very good at going in. They slow down, obviously, before they go in. So you can get quite a good look at them. If you're looking at bats coming out, it's not so easy because they come out very quickly. Now, I think in total there were 11 bats, though they're not all in this particular video here. So that was a project that lasted 4 months. And in that 4 months, using cameras, probably not many people have used these cameras for bats before. And I actually discovered 3 bat calls that hadn't been recorded before, because I had the camera and you could see what the bat was doing, and I also had a bat recorder, so you could tie the sound the bat was making with what the bat was doing. And that's how I discovered the 3 different calls. Now, in the same roost, it's taken from a slightly different angle, but a group of long-eared bats came by and thought they'd have a look in the roost. And people quite often want to know if the roosts are used by, one's just gone inside just to inspect it. This roost is being used by barber-tailed bats, but the long-eared bats came and had a look. They didn't actually stay on this occasion, and the one that went in will come out in just a minute. There it goes. That's him. Now, it's actually very easy to distinguish long-eared bats, not just from the long ears, but they have a very distinctive fluttering flight. A few more bats. Now this is in a woodland near me. It was a small mine. I'm not quite sure what they were mining, to be honest, but it was a small mine with quite a low entrance. And it was surveyed by a group of people who had to put their hard hats on and crawled into the mine. And they found a group of greater horseshoe bats. So I put the camera up outside. I wasn't going to go inside. Put the camera up outside just to see if there were still any bats there in the mine. And there was, oh, back it goes. There was one greater horseshoe. You can see him flying in and out of the mine. He was also in the mine as well, and you could see him actually going up and down. So there must be some food in the mine as well. So it was slightly disappointing. I was hoping to see a whole collection of them, but there was just the one. But at least he was still there. So if you see something like this, a mine anywhere, really, putting a camera outside, it's quite interesting what you might see coming out of it. And more bats. We'll be showing lots of other wildlife if you're not interested in bats. Now, this is a small reservoir in Dartmoor. It's 70 meters square, so those trees in the background are about 70 meters away, and the light on the camera was sufficient. You could actually see the trees, though a bat 70 meters away is quite small. So I set this camera up. It was there for a few weeks, and this was in July. And you see the bats, they look white because it's all infrared light now, so they appear white. There's also the odd moth, but the bats are the ones flying mainly in the middle. And you see they fly very fast. There's two of them having a discussion. They fly very fast. I'll just keep the video going a couple of times. And they kept this up for hours. They really work hard to get their food. It's mainly sort of insects above the water. So they did this every night for at least 3 or 4 hours, and then there was still some that kept going all night, whether not necessarily the same bat, but they really work hard. And I think it's really interesting to see them flying very fast. And this is why you can't use things like trail cameras with bats, because the bats move so quickly. Another disadvantage of trail cameras, which I showed you earlier, is that they take just a few seconds or maybe even a second before they start recording, and by then the bat's gone. So you can't very often use them for bats. This was a setup I used. There was a camera on a post, bat recorder there. For those of you who are knowledgeable about bat recorders, this was a Wildlife Acoustics SM4. And in the big box here was the recorder and the battery. Okay, and this is the reservoir here. You see, it was left in place for several weeks, about 4 weeks, I think. We did expect to see Daubenton's bats, but it actually turned out that they were soprano pipistrelle bats. Okay. So moving on. Now, as I said, you can also use these systems for dormice, but they're very difficult to monitor in the wild because they are a protected species. And the way they're monitored at present is that people put out maybe 50 boxes in a wood. They're like nest boxes for birds, except that the holes at the back rather than the front. And the dormice very often use these boxes to build their nests and to raise their young. And then the boxes are checked several times a year to see if there are dormice inside. And of course, doing that, you don't actually see what the dormice are doing. This particular dormouse is from a wildlife hospital, but they are very cute dormice. If people don't like mice, they do like dormice. So what I did was, I'll show you a slide further on. They have a lot of dormouse boxes at Woodland Trust. This was in Finglewood, near Dartmoor. And what I did was design a lid, exactly like the normal dormouse lid, but with a camera on the top looking through the lid. And it had infrared light again. It did not disturb the dormice because it just carried on as normal. They were not at all affected by the infrared light. Now, every night before the dormice went out to forage, because they forage at night, they'd have a grooming session. And everything was groomed, at the tip of the tail, the ears, everywhere. The good old grooming before they would go out. And because it's infrared light, everything's in black and white in this case. So this is a piece of behavior that you wouldn't normally see without a camera. Nobody would know, you wouldn't know that they had a grooming session every night. Another thing they like to do, as I'll show you in the next video. Another thing they like to do is look out the hole in the box before going out. Now, producing videos like this, not only can you look at dormouse behavior and get some insight into the behavior, but the videos can also be used for public engagement. If you have a nature reserve with dormice, you can't show people the dormice because they're protected, but you can show them videos of the dormice. And this is 2 young dormice. Earlier on, we'd actually seen the mother with the 2 babies, and these are the babies who've grown up. And it's very interesting to watch them having and saying hello to each other. But the dormouse that's just come out wants to get to look out the hole that the other dormouse has got. So he does his best to try and get to look out the hole, clambering over the other one. He finally managed to get out. Now the other dormouse was not happy about this. He started chewing its feet and then chewing its tail. I don't think it got very far. So in the end, the 2 of them would go out to forage and then come back again. And again, that's not the sort of thing that you would know about if you didn't have the camera. So we had made quite a lot of videos from the Woodland Trust project, which turned out to be very successful. And this is exactly how the system was set up. This is a cross section. So it's just a normal dormouse lid, normal dormouse box. The ones I said they often put out in woodland to monitor dormice. Actually, the dormice like them in the same way that birds, sorry, that mouse again, the computer mouse, not the dormouse. And it's just a normal lid, just drill the hole in the lid and put this small bird box camera. You can see there's little squares, you have to cut the square hole, which is a bit fiddly. And these are the LEDs, and that's the camera lens. So that's looking down into the box. And what we do is just slide off the dormouse lid and then slide this one on, and it didn't cause any disturbance. Another advantage is that you can have quite a long cable from the camera. That's the camera, there's the cable, to the recorder. You could have it, say, 20 meters away, and that way you could see what was going on in the box without causing any disturbance. And that's a big thing as far as dormice. If you have to check the boxes, you do disturb the dormice, but if you have a camera there, it doesn't disturb them, and you can learn a lot about their behavior. Because they're protected, if you did have a box like this in your garden, if you weren't an ecologist, in theory, you couldn't actually look in the box if there were dormice there. You could look in to see if there are dormice, but once you know they're there, you can't disturb them unless you have a dormouse license. Otters, everybody's favorite. These were actually filmed on the Shetland Islands. If you want to see otters in the wild, that's the best place to go. Now this is the River Bovey, and I have a camera here, and the camera was left out for quite some time. And if you look very carefully, you will see a very quick otter coming from the left, jumping over the rocks, and then going, and there he comes, there he goes, over the rocks, and there he goes underwater. So this camera was up, we had it up for a couple of months, and this was the only video we got in daylight, in colour. And you see, very quick, you didn't see very much of the otter, but we did see it. And that was in June. You see, it was nearly 9 o'clock when it's still light in June. But we did get quite a lot more at night, because the otters forage at night. I think that first otter was just going somewhere on a journey. He wasn't actually looking for food, but they do prefer to forage at night because it's safer. And they use their whiskers to tell them, the whiskers vibrate when they're near prey. But what is quite amazing about this video, and quite a lot of videos like this, is that the otters, this water is actually quite turbulent. There's the otter coming in. I'll keep it on repeat so you can see what's happening. And the water here is very turbulent. It's probably not obvious to see, but the otters are not the least bit phased. They are so good in water that's moving. And there he is, he's up there now. He's doing foraging. He's having a good look around everywhere, trying to see if there's any prey around. Then he comes back here. There he is again. You can see his eyes reflecting the infrared light. And he's actually underwater there. And then he's just gone upstream there. Now I'll just let it go through once more because it's very easy to miss some of the actions. Here he comes over the rocks. And he goes in between the rocks, then he goes up to that part in the middle. There he goes, you can just see him if you look very closely. And in a minute, he's foraging around in that pool. It's a bit deeper there. You just saw his eyes reflecting the infrared light. And then he comes down into the very turbulent part and doesn't bother at all. There he goes. Not the least bit affected by the fact the water is very fast moving and a lot of rocks there. And then he goes off. There he goes, just up to the top there. This is the setup there. Look very similar to the other one. Slightly different camera. Same post. In this case, I was very fortunate. It was next to someone's garden, and she had power in her shed, so we were allowed to use mains power, which does mean you didn't have to come and charge the batteries. And we had the cable on the ground. It was in a split conduit pin down to protect it and protect people as well, so they didn't trip over it. Badgers are very often monitored for research near near their sets, but badgers are very interesting creatures. They're quite entertaining at times. So this was actually in previous. Sorry, this is my mouse. It keeps catching the thing on the top. So you can monitor them for research, or if you think you might have them in your garden, or if you know a wood where there are badgers, you can set up the equipment. It's much easier near a set because then you know where the badgers are and where they're going to come out. Now this one, you see the badger, it's a young badger. You know it's young because it's very clean, and you can just tell the difference between a young badger looking clean and an old badger, which is a bit scruffy looking and a bit low slung. And you see it's going backwards. Now badgers are quite adept at going backwards because when they're bringing bedding into their sets, they grab it and sort of go backwards into the set. So they drag everything backwards in. So they're quite adept at going backwards. In this case, I had a few peanuts out, and that's what he was looking for. So the badgers are very entertaining. You can find out quite a lot about them. I know people who've done research with badgers, and they used trail cameras and CCTV cameras, but they found that the badgers didn't like the trail cameras because they could see, well, I don't know if it's the fact they could see a bit of red glow or if it was the sound that they made, but the person doing the research, he said that they didn't use the set entrances where the trail cameras were, but they weren't bothered by the night vision cameras, the security cameras, because they can be put up higher, pointing downwards. So that was quite interesting. This is another one. This was taken in my garden. And in this case, I actually had light. And the badgers could choose whether or not to come near the light, but they didn't mind the light. And I used to film foxes as well, who also didn't mind the fact it was a light. So this badger is just coming along. You see him on a minute. There he comes. Having a good sniff. And then he marks a spot, and then he goes off. So it's a very short visit. But when I had this camera set up here, I used to see all sorts of interesting behavior. At one point, there were four badgers came up and all sort of jockeying to see what was there, looking in the shrubbery. They tend to eat worms. You may or may not know that, and they dig them up. That's their favorite food. But they do like peanuts as well, and windfall apples. And this is used exactly the same type of camera and recorder, exactly the same system as I've used before with the other examples. Now, this is taken in a garden, Actually, I said it was my garden. I wasn't supposed to say my garden, but this is my garden. And there's a big wood to the right of the picture here. And fallow deer frequently come into the garden. Now, before I moved here, I never saw fallow deer. I always wanted to film deer. I did manage to film roe deer, but with a great deal of effort. Got some in the field. But I'm very fortunate here that they came into my garden. Now, these are apple trees, and they are very fond of apples. Not just the apples, they like the leaves, the young leaves and the young shoots on the apples. And they quite often come in to the garden, stand on their hind legs to try and get to the juicy shoots up on the tree. And they bring their young round, and usually once they've grown about autumn, when the apples are there, just to show them where all the food is. So once they have discovered a place where there is food and where they think it's safe to be, then they come back. And these deer come into my garden regularly, and just all throughout the year. They more often in autumn because that's where the apples are around, but they come all through the year. And at the moment, this particular grass here is covered in primroses. And the other morning, I drew the curtains, looked out the window, and there was a deer nibbling the primroses. In fact, 2 deer nibbling the primroses. They just have a few, nibble a few, and then move on to the next clump and so on. But this was taken. This was taken in autumn, I think. Taken in October, it's the 10 here. And it's 3 young deer chasing each other round and round the garden. And the other one in the middle is just kind of watching, not joining in. And this was sort of early evening, when it's still light. And it's not something I would have expected to get. I think it's really great to see them. So this is not really for conservation, this is just for interest. So the whole point about these systems, because they're relatively straightforward and because they're so flexible, they can be used just for anyone in the garden, as I've done here, or in a wood nearby. You can use for more serious research. They can be used for ecology surveys. They're really very flexible, and as I said, for public engagement, which is probably the one great advantage. It's the best way of getting videos. So they did this several nights in a row. Now I've also used cameras for a small mammal feeding station. This is just really to find out what was there. And in this case, I just used a tube, plastic ducting, which is very cheap and easy to get, with a little camera on the end, another little bird box camera. And this is just really to see exactly what kind of wildlife was around and what types of small mammals are around. And I do tend to use this in a slightly more serious form research in a wood on the edge of Dartmoor, just really to see just how good the system is, because at the moment small mammals tend to be surveyed using traps. They're live traps, but you can't leave them unattended for more than 12 hours. I think it's 12 hours, for obviously the safety of the wildlife, so they don't suffer from it. But with the system, with a camera, they're not disturbed at all. You put down some seeds, and in an area usually with quite dense growth where you're liable to find small mammals. So it might be mice. Not everybody likes mice. It might be voles, a lot of bank voles and field voles around. Might even be weasels, stoats, harvest mice, and you could even see dormice if you're lucky. You have to leave them out for a little while. Now this one is filmed at night, so it's using infrared cameras, which is why it's in black and white. And this is 2 wood mice. Now, as you see, the 2 of them, and they were there for ages, and they ate a lot. It's possible that they just put some in their jaws and took it away for later, but they were there for ages and ages, eating their way through the nuts. And then a few hours later, a vole came along, and of course there was nothing left because the wood mice had eaten it all. So they do eat quite a lot. But it's a very simple system to set up, and it's quite fun to see sort of what's in your garden, or if you want to do more serious research on small mammals, because there's not a great deal done on small mammals there, and there's a lot that can be done, especially on stoats and weasels. Okay. Now, birds of prey. This is a somewhat more ambitious project. This was again with the Woodland Trust. The back ones I showed you earlier, they were for Natural England. This is for the Woodland Trust. And these were used for birds of prey. There were birds for peregrines, which were nesting somewhere. I can't say where. And because they are really protected, you can't sort of go back and change batteries every week or whatever. And so we had to have a system where we could film them and then look at the recordings without disturbing them. So they have a camera, and this is an internet, a digital camera, connected to a transmitter. And then 2-3 kilometers away was a receiver, which is connected to a recorder. And it's quite amazing, really. I'm always amazed that this works. But on the recorder, we got all the videos of the peregrines that the camera recorded. And the camera was there for 4 months, recording 24 hours a day. So there were a lot of videos. A bit more about that later. But the fortunate that birds were on a rock which was up quite high, and there was a valley in between, and there's a very convenient house about 3 kilometers away, and they were very good, and they let us put the receiver in their greenhouse with the recorder. So we didn't use the internet. You didn't want us to use the internet, but you don't need the internet. We just looked at the recorder and see what the peregrines were doing. This system can be used for anything, not just birds of prey. Wherever you have a line of sight, whether your transmitter and receiver don't have any obstructions between them, a line of sight, they're supposed to be able to use for about 15 kilometers. But so it's rather a specialized application and not straightforward. It's just really to illustrate that you can use them for a great many different situations. They are sometimes used, this system is sometimes used for peregrines in churches, where they have the camera on the birds, and then the signals are transmitted to a receiver somewhere else. And I think the Hawk Plus, I think they do use that on occasion. Now, it's not just a matter of doing it for research or for ecology. A lot of us really just like seeing wildlife. And in this case, sorry, done it again. A very large thistle in my garden. Not everybody wants large thistles in their gardens, but if you like wildlife, I would recommend having a large thistle in your garden, because it's very, very popular. Thistle seed is popular with goldfinches. And this is what we have here. So I saw this large thistle. I put my camera up in the hope that some goldfinches would come along, and they did, right on cue. And it was just up for a couple of days. And there's actually 3. Another couple come in a minute. And in the same time, I think it's just 3 days was there, I also got a roe deer walking past. Unfortunately, it's not on this video. But all sorts can happen. There's number 2 and number 3. And it's not often you get at a close look at this kind of situation, because as soon as you come out anywhere near that, they will all fly off. So this is, another advantage of using this system, is that you see things that you can't normally see, simply because whatever it is you're trying to look at, birds or whatever, are very sensitive to human presence. But you have your camera set up, you can leave it alone, it can be left unattended, and that way you can film all sorts of things that you wouldn't normally be able to film, wouldn't normally be able to see. Right, so I have to give a bit about why these particular systems are so good compared to some other camera systems. I think the advantage of security cameras and recorders is that there's a huge market. Security market is absolutely huge, and the manufacturers are very competitive. There are quite a few manufacturers, and so because of the competition, they are very advanced compared to other types of cameras that you might get, particularly the recorders. You get much better quality images generally, compared with trail cameras, for example. But it's more the advantages you get with the recorders. Now, this is a bit more technical, but it is quite important, I think, to understand some of the advantages. If you want to use this system, you want to know why you're going to go the trouble if something's a bit more complex. There's motion detection, and I'm going to talk about motion detection, pre-record, and intrusion detection, not all of them. Motion detection with trail cameras, they start recording when something moves because the heat signal is changing. With these systems, motion detection is actual motion. It's not whether something hotter than the surroundings comes by, it's actually something moving. Privacy masking, this is really more for the ecologists who want to perhaps do back emergent surveys, that you can mask out. For example, if you were doing it in a house, you could actually mask out the windows of the house so that they wouldn't appear at all on the video for privacy. Pre-record, this is where something I'll explain in a minute, because if I just do it quickly, you don't get the full wonder of it, if you like. But basically, you can keep a bit of video at the front so you don't miss anything. Post-record, you can actually decide how long to keep recording for after things stop moving. You can have continuous playback, or have it continuously recording, or you could have it recording continuously with motion as well. You can schedule the recording. So you could have recording over two periods, maybe the morning and the evening, or you can have more than two. So it is very, very flexible. Now it has a clock on, and you can actually change the time. And so it's very good for synchronizing. If you remember the ones with the bats, there was a recorder and that's time synchronized with the bat recorder, so that when you see a bat doing something or anything doing something, and you hear the call they're making, then if they're exactly the same time, then you know that that bat is making that call. So time synchronization can be very useful for that kind of situation. Video content analysis. I suppose nowadays we call it AI, but it's not really. This is set up, it analyzes the videos in a way that is very useful for reducing the amount of video that you have to analyze. So a little bit of detail about that in a minute. And you can record for long periods, weeks on end, months on end, because equipment is designed to do that. And not many other cameras are designed to record for long periods. So that is a great advantage. So you can set them up to record, to monitor something that's going on. And this is great advantage in conservation, where you have to really watch things for a long time to see what's happening, or you want to compare what happened yesterday, what happened today, or different times of the year. So you can record for long periods. Obviously, if you're doing it with a battery, you have to change the battery, you have to charge the batteries. But they are set up for that. They are very strong for that point of view. As I said, the image at night is very good. With trail cameras, the image is not always very good. As you can see from this, this is not that late, but it was dark. It was taken in February. And with a lot of trail cameras, not all of them, but most of them, the night videos are only 15 seconds, certainly with the Bushnell, which is a very common one. 15 seconds is not very long, and it does mean you have lots and lots of very short videos, which can be rather tedious to wade through, and the quality is not all that good. Though there are some that are good. So this is with the security cameras. I said this was taken, this is part of one taken about 2015, and even then the video quality was good, but it is even better now. You can even get them as 4K, I think, which is very high definition, but it's not really required. You can get very good quality. And I go back to this one. The nighttime tends to be 15 seconds. It's fixed at 16 seconds, and then it stops recording. really to save the batteries, and then another 15 seconds. So you can have a lot of videos in an hour. But with the camera systems I use as security systems, the video length depends on the time something is in motion. So as long as what you're looking at keeps moving, the recorder will keep recording. But if something only moves for short periods, you can also say, well, I want my videos to record for 30 minutes or even an hour or just 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So that's something you can input, very valuable. If you have some creatures that don't move a lot, for example, deer can often stand and not move for quite a while, and badgers can do the same, then it would stop recording normally. But if you put in, say, a user input, let's say 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes, it means that when they start moving again, you've got continuous recording. So a very flexible system. Now, motion detection, if I just set this video, there's that you will see an otter zooming past at one point. Whatever type of motion detection, whether it's with a trail camera or just normal motion, there are a lot, this video will keep repeating. There are a lot of things here which could trigger motion. You've got all these leaves moving. You've got the odd moth, there it goes, flying around. And you've got all this turbulent water at the edge, which means if you have this camera up as I had for about a week, and the otter only comes past a couple of times, you could have an awful lot of videos. If you just used motion recording over the whole of what the camera is actually looking at. But with motion detection, you can draw a shape. Now the change, some have a little grid that you mark and you clear, you just have a grid where you want it to record by motion detection. But the more modern ones now, you can actually draw a shape digitally with the mouse on the recorder screen. You can draw a shape. Now I've just drawn a very simple shape here, but you can draw shapes with about 10 points, so they can, much more flexible shapes. So in this bit here, that's the only area where recording will be triggered by motion. So all these moving leaves, well, when they move, the moving leaves will not trigger recording, and the moths flying here will not trigger recording, and the turbulent water will not trigger recording. But having said that, it's very difficult to get rid of all of the turbulent water. But using motion detection, and you can decide exactly where you want motion to start recording and where you don't want it to start recording. So it is very flexible, and you can adjust it to really any particular situation. Very useful. Then I talked about pre-record, where you keep a bit of video in a buffer. Now, if you have a system, this is actually a trail camera type situation. Motion starts, but the camera in the trail camera is the whole thing, which includes the recorder as well. It doesn't start recording immediately. The time can be 1 second or a bit less than a second, but then it's got to get the recording going, which means that you miss a part of the motion. And this is particularly the case with otters, who tend to move very fast. And so very often you get numerous videos of a tail disappearing, but you don't see anything else. So that's the first problem, the fact that you miss a bit at the beginning. The second problem is that most trail cameras only have about 60-second videos, sometimes they're a bit longer. So you have a short video, the recording will stop, and then you have to wait another second before you can start recording again, and you're also going to miss a bit at the beginning. So if you have a system that doesn't have pre-record, and if it has fixed video lengths, you're going to have lots of short videos, and you're going to keep having gaps and missing it, which is very annoying if you want to see what's happening. Even if the otter is still moving, you're not going to be recording it because of this stop and start system with no pre-record. But with the security system, you have pre-record. Now that just means there's a buffer which keeps some of the video, and when recording starts, that section, say about 5 seconds, or you can make it longer, will be put on the beginning of the video. So you will not miss that bit in here, because everything takes a little while to get recording triggered. Whenever the motion starts and recording starts, you're not going to miss this part at the beginning. So you're going to get all the information, you're going to get the whole lot and not just the disappearing tail. The other advantage is that recording will continue as long as the motion continues. As long as the otter is moving, you will get recording. And of course, you can set it up to record even longer than that if necessary. And because it continues, you get one continuous video. Great advantage, another great advantage of these camera systems is that you have continuous videos, which are much easier to analyze. You don't have to open every little video and look at it and then open the next one and open the next one. You have one big video. Plus this bit at the beginning with pre-record. Intrusion detection, this is part of the video analysis, or AI if you like. So although it looks exactly the same as the image a few back for motion detection, intrusion detection works in a slightly different way. Intrusion detection only triggers a tiny little record. What it really does is set an alarm, or it just registers or sets a tag, whatever you want to call it, in the recorder, basically saying there was intrusion detection here. So you draw a shape. Again, it can be any shape with 10 points. I've just drawn this to make it easier. And you can also set up a time. So you can say, using the recorder, if something enters this shape and stays there for 1 second or 2 seconds or whatever, then that is intrusion, and you will set this up as a tag. And the advantage of that is if you were recording something for several periods, if you think back to the peregrines, we recorded them continuously for 4 months. We drew a shape like this on a ledge where the peregrines were nesting, so that every time they came onto that ledge, we got this tag saying something has entered the ledge. And that meant we could go straight to the part of the video, because we can actually search for all these intrusions, which tells you exactly where, what the time and the date was. So we can go to that part of the video. And in that way, instead of having to analyze a whole 4 months of video, which can take weeks and weeks, you just have a list. It's usually quite a short list, and particularly for peregrines going on the nest, it's quite a short list. And it means you're only analysing them for, it just took a few hours to analyse what would normally take a few weeks. So intrusion detection, its main purpose is to reduce the amount of video that you have to analyse. And that is really probably the best advantage you can have, because if you've got lots and lots, thousands of videos, hundreds of videos, thousands of videos, analysis can be quite tedious. But this way, you reduce your analysis time and you get straight to the heart of where the action is. So just a little bit about the equipment, and then we'll get on to, you can ask questions. Now, with this system, I have the recorder. This is the recorder I use, very small. It's smaller than the size of a trail camera. And I put it in this box. This is actually a system which, it's a registered design, but you can make one for yourself, but you can't sell them to other people. So in this system, you connect this end here to the camera, and this end inside the box to the power. And there's the lead from the camera connected to the recorder. That's the power connected to the recorder, and the power from the battery is just connected to here. And the power goes to the recorder and also to the camera. So all you really have to do with this is connect the power and connect the camera. And so obviously you normally have a much longer cable. So this is the system I sort of developed with my years of doing research on the CCTV systems using security equipment. So it does speed things up. It also keeps everything together, makes it much easier to connect. And normally I put this recorder in a bigger plastic box with the battery, and then put a piece of pond liner over the top. That's to keep it completely waterproof, and that has worked very well for me for a number of years. And this link at the bottom here tells you exactly how you can put together that kit. That's this kit here, tells you the equipment you need. I can also, if you're interested and if you put your name in the chat, your email address, I can send you the details of how you can, where you can get the equipment and exactly what equipment to get. I may put it on the Mammal Society website, but the problem is that it changes very quickly. But certainly you can do that if you're interested. But I haven't really gone into the detailed step-by-step instructions of how to set it up, because that, I think I'm just really trying to show you how they could be used for conservation, and also if you're just interested in wildlife. But I have written a book. I've actually got it here, as you can see it there. And this is really very detailed step-by-step instructions how to set up and use equipment. And all the applications use almost exactly the same equipment. There are small differences, but if you can use equipment to study badgers, you can use it for using all this for these other wildlife as well. And it's set up with separate chapters for ecologists, for schools, for researchers, and if you're just interested in wildlife. So that is it. It's only just out recently. And as I say, the link at the bottom shows you how you can put the mobile kit together and what to use it for. Okay, now that is really the end of what I wanted to say. So I hope you have a lot of questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen. And I hope you have a lot of questions to ask me. If you can put them in the chat.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Oh.
To make it easier, if you want to send me your email once I send you the recording, then I can compile this and just send it to Susan, so it will be easier for her to provide more information.
Do we have any questions? I always say this, but people don't always ask questions. I hope you're going to ask them questions. You just put your hand up. And somebody else.
You go.
Any questions? No. There's some downloads said they didn't see any moving images. I hope that actually worked.
It did start working in the end.
Oh yeah. Any questions?
Okay, well, while we wait for people to type them. Oh, okay, one here.
Oh, no question here. How long can the recorder record for? Right, well, the recorders are 1 terabyte. And I'm just trying to think how long. They can record for, several weeks. But it's not a good idea to leave it for too long, because then you have too much to analyze. So what I normally do, if I'm going to be recording for several weeks at a time, I probably leave it for a couple of weeks, and then I might swap over with another one if it's a very long period. So that the advantage of that is you don't have too much to analyze all at one time, because that can take quite a while, even with all these wonderful advantages you've got with the security systems. But certainly you can leave it up for weeks and weeks, and they're really very, very good. 1 terabyte is quite a lot, but you can sort of check it every now and then.
That's great. We just have someone that raises their hand, so I allow them to speak.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the questions on the chat. Eleanor Jones, which camera is my preferred choice? The camera and recorder, I tend to use Hikvision. I've actually got a camera here. I can show it to you. See it there? Hikvision, they're one of the bigger companies. And the reason I use them is because they have very advanced. And the recorder, which is I want to have here, very small recorder. This is the one with the hard drive in, and they're the only ones who've made a recorder like this at the moment. Very portable, absolutely brilliant, because it's very lightweight, it's easy to carry in the mobile kit, and the other advantage is it's quite portable. So I don't suggest you drop it. But because it's not got a hard disk, it's got a solid state drive, it's much stronger. So Hikvision I tend to use. They have a whole range of cameras, but it's always the bottom end, the sort of cheaper cameras that you have to use, and they're usually less than £100. You can get them for even less than that if you get the smaller ones. And it's always good to have the camera and the recorder from the same manufacturer, certainly with Hikvision, because then you get all the advantages built into the recorder. Okay, well, that answers your question. And another question, what type of batteries do you use? I tend to use, I've got a small one here. This is a very small one. It's a lithium polymer from Tracer Power, which is a UK. So lithium batteries, this is the very smallest. I tend to use much bigger ones as well. They're very good. They're very safe, well, relatively safe. And this small one is one you would use for if you're doing bat immersion for a couple of hours. That could last a couple of hours. But if you want to leave them for longer, I use much bigger ones, which do cost a bit more. You can get cheaper ones. You can use lead acid batteries, but I wouldn't really recommend them for lots of reasons. One is you can only use about 60% of them, because with lead acid batteries, that's like car type batteries, when they're used, they start discharging like that. So they're continually reducing in voltage, which means sometimes they don't always, the camera doesn't always work with them once it's started to discharge. But the lithium batteries, they charge almost in a straight line and then just suddenly drop off. So they're much better from that point of view. And although they're more expensive, you can continually recharge them hundreds of times, and with the more expensive one, thousands of times. And I've got one that I use now that I got in 2016, and it's still working. So although they seem expensive, they do last a long time. So they're very good. If I send the equipment list to you, I say I will put one on the website eventually, but they do change. It's also, you get the batteries, or I get the batteries from Tracer Power, and the cameras, lots of different people sell them, but I tend to use it as a company in Ireland that I use who are very good. But most people you find sell Hikvision. Okay. Do you have any other questions?
Not at the moment.
No.
I guess I have one for now, while we wait for people to type. So how did you first get interested into this topic? Was it by accident? Were you just experimenting with a new hobby or monitoring
Yeah.
technique?
Well, I do write as well. I was a sort of wildlife photographer. Well, I still am really. And I used to just go out. I used to get really fed up having to go out, sort of getting up at 5 in the morning and standing in the cold, waiting for something to come along. I did it for quite a while, but after a while it does get a bit, do I really want to go up at 5 and go out when it's freezing cold to try and see something? Or do I want to sit around for hours waiting for something to come along? So I started to use trail cameras, quite a long time ago now, really before they were sort of properly used. I thought they were quite good at the time. But then trail cameras, I got a bit disheartened with them because there's so many short little files, and if something was fast moving, you couldn't record it, it just shot past too quickly. So then I started using bird box cameras. I thought, oh, these are quite good, but not very good quality at that time. And then that's when I looked at security cameras, and I thought, well, I'll try using those. But they're not really used very much for wildlife, and they're not really advertised in the same way that thermal cameras are, mainly because the security market is so large that they make their money from that, and they wouldn't make much from wildlife, and they don't know much about wildlife generally. So this is really why you don't see a lot about CCTV cameras used for wildlife, simply because they're not pushed by the manufacturers because they make so much money elsewhere. But they really are such a good system, so flexible, not expensive. But the batteries are perhaps, but they last a long time. Cameras cost less than 100. The recorders, you can get them cheaper ones, but I think that was about 180 or something, the one I use. Very cheap, very flexible, and you can use them almost anywhere. So they're really worth that little bit of effort trying to find out how they work. the reason I wrote the book is because I think people were quite often put off by the technology. They find it a bit daunting. And everything is if you're not used to it. But once you know what to do, it's really quite, you realise just how straightforward it is. And I did actually do this last year with someone on the Mammal Society team, if you like, as a challenge to, this is for bats. She's actually an ecologist, and she does a lot about bats. And she said she didn't know anything about, she couldn't use technology. She was no good at technology. But I managed to persuade her to do it, and gave her some equipment and showed her how to use it. And then once it clicked, I really think I converted her, and she realized that, you know, it's not that difficult at all. So it's like anything, if it's something you're not used to, it can seem daunting. So I wrote the book for that very reason, so that even if you know absolutely nothing about technology, hopefully, I've explained it in a way that you'll be able to use it. And I hope you will, because it's really very rewarding. I just found another thing here.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
I have used a solar panel I did that when we did the one for the peregrines using radio transmission. I did use a solar panel. We had a fuel cell with a lead acid battery in, and we used a solar panel as well. The fuel cell sort of kicked in, so we did use it. But the problem is they're not quite so good with, you can use them with lithium batteries, but it's an awful lot of effort, really. You can get very small solar panels for sort of bird boxes, but if you're wanting to record things over a long period of time with a larger camera, I have used it, but it's such a lot of work. I think you can do that. I'll leave it at that. And I do have a bit in my book about solar panels, so they can be used, but I find it easier to just change the batteries over and charge the batteries.
Great.
Right, another question here.
Yeah, we just had someone with a raised hand, but I think they lowered it. So yeah, if they want to ask a question in the chat or to speak, I give her permission to.
Yeah, people are putting them in the chat. Rosie got. So the question here on the chat says, when you say connect to a monitor, could that just be a tablet or mobile? You can't normally connect. No, you don't use a tablet, or it doesn't work. Not most of them, very few of them will actually take an input from these recorders. Oh, sorry. So what I do, a monitor is just one you might connect your PC to if you use a desk PC. They can work, but even you have to usually buy a separate connector. So I just use any monitor that can take an HDMI cable will work. Most monitors take HDMI cables. Tablets or mobiles don't generally want to take signals into them. There might be the odd one that does, but I find that they don't do it. They're not really set up for that. So I suppose the question is, no, you have to buy a monitor, but they're very cheap. Or as I say, you could use the monitor connected to your PC. Anything with an HDMI cable connection.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, so I will, as I say, if you go onto the Mammal Society, you can find a little bit more about the system. If you want to buy the book, if you really want to know how to do it, it makes it a lot easier. And there's not many other places that tell you how to use these cameras for wildlife, unfortunately. And it's something I'm very surprised at, because it's just so flexible and so successful. So I hope I've at least inspired some of you to use this system. And even if you just want to start with trail cameras and then move on to the security system, I hope too that you can find it as useful as I have. And whether you just want to use it for your animals in your garden, or whether you want to use it as an ecologist or researcher, it's certainly well worth the effort.
Thank you so much again. It was really insightful, and you were so exhaustive in explaining it that I think that's the reason why we didn't have that many questions.
Okay.
Okay, so as mentioned at the beginning, just because I saw that some people joined later. So as you can see, this webinar was recorded, and I'm going to send the link to you. And at that point, if you want more information, you can just reply with your email, and I will compile a list and send it to Susan.
Somebody said it's inspiring. Thank you, Howard. Maybe it'll be your videos I'll be watching soon, hopefully, on YouTube. I don't use YouTube really, but it's a great place. Okay, shall we say goodnight then?
Yeah, I will just stop the recording.